My name is Isaac Miller, and I was born into an Amish community nestled deep in the rolling farmlands of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. My world was simple, structured, and rooted in tradition. We had no electricity, no cars, and no distractions from the outside world. Everything about our lives, from the clothes we wore to the way we worshipped, was governed by ordnung, the sacred set of rules that defined us. I had never known any different. From the time I was a child, I was taught that obedience to these traditions was the key to salvation. Work hard, remain humble, honor your family, and above all, never question the path set before you. My parents embodied these values, and I strove to follow in their footsteps. My father was a man of few words, his hands calloused from years of working the fields, his faith unwavering. My mother, quiet and kind, carried the weight of our home with the same steady devotion. I wanted to make them proud. I wanted to make God proud. And yet, deep inside, a quiet unrest gnawed at me. Each morning before dawn, I would rise to the sound of the rooster crowing, pull on my suspenders, and step out into the crisp morning air. The farm was alive before the first light of day, horses whinnied in their stalls, the scent of freshly turned earth filled my lungs, and the rhythm of work began as predictably as the sun's ascent. I would hitch up the plow, guiding our horses through the fields, feeling the cool soil churn beneath me. I should have felt content, grounded in the purpose given to me. But some days, as I stood in the vast fields with nothing but the open sky stretching above me, I would pause and feel something unsettling, an emptiness that I could not explain. At night, as I sat at the long wooden table with my family, the flickering light of kerosene lamps casting shadows on the walls, I would watch my father lead us in prayer. His voice was firm, steady, unwavering. My mother would bow her head, hands folded neatly in her lap, while my younger siblings dutifully followed along. I did the same. I spoke the words, let them pass through my lips. But sometimes, as I whispered prayers into the darkness of my room at night, I wondered, was God listening? Was I truly saved, or was I just going through the motions? I buried these doubts, convinced they were a sign of weakness. To question the ordnung, to question the ways of our people, was unthinkable. But the fear remained. I told myself that faith was not about feeling, that obedience was what mattered. And yet, a small voice inside me asked, was it enough? Was I enough? I didn't know it then, but those questions would one day change everything. The day everything changed began like any other. I had gone into town to pick up supplies, flour, sugar, oats, simple things we needed for the week. The sky hung gray and heavy with the weight of an impending snowfall, and the air carried that sharp winter bite that stung my skin as I guided my horse-drawn buggy along the winding road back home. The clatter of hooves on the frozen dirt was familiar, steady. Routine. I should have seen the truck coming. I didn't. Out of nowhere, from around a sharp bend in the road, headlights barreled toward me. Fast. Too fast. The blinding glare cut through the afternoon haze, and in that split second, my breath hitched in my throat. There was no time. No space to swerve. No way to stop what was coming. The impact was instant. A deafening crash shattered the air, metal crumpling, wood splintering, my body jolted violently as if I had been ripped from the earth itself. I should have felt pain, should have screamed, but there was nothing. Only silence. A terrible, vast silence that swallowed everything. And then, darkness. Not just the absence of light, but something deeper, heavier. A suffocating void that pressed against me from every direction. Cold. Hollow. Infinite. Where was I? I tried to move, but there was nothing beneath me. No ground. No sky. No sense of up or down. I was suspended in an abyss that had no shape, no edge, no end. My breath came in short, sharp gasps, but even that felt stolen by the consuming blackness. Hello. My voice, if it was mine, sounded impossibly distant, swallowed almost instantly by the void. No response. Panic gripped me, cold and merciless. This couldn't be real. I had been on the road. I had seen the truck. Hadn't I? Maybe I was unconscious, trapped beneath wreckage, waiting for someone to pull me free. I had to be. But then the weight of reality pressed down on me with horrifying certainty. I was not in my buggy. I was not on the road. I was nowhere. The fear clawed up my throat like a living thing. I flailed, trying to find something, anything to hold on to, but there was nothing. No form. No texture. Just the infinite, crushing nothingness. This wasn't sleep. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't even death as I had imagined it. The thought sent a jolt of terror through me. Hadn't I lived a righteous life? Hadn't I followed every rule? If I had died, then why wasn't I standing in the presence of God? My heart pounded in my chest, if I even still had a chest. Every belief I had clung to, every truth I had been taught, suddenly felt fragile, like thin glass shattering under the weight of a terrible, unspoken reality. I was alone. Utterly, terrifyingly alone. I don't know how long I existed in that darkness. Minutes? Hours? An eternity? Time had no meaning here. I couldn't feel my body, but the crushing weight of the emptiness wrapped around me like a suffocating shroud. I tried to breathe, but there was no air. I tried to move, but there was no ground. I tried to cry out, but the silence swallowed my voice whole. And then, the horror deepened. Out of the black void, something began to stir, not around me, but within me. Memories. Scenes from my life flickered before me, not like distant recollections, but as though I were watching myself from the outside, detached and powerless. I saw my hands gripping the worn wooden plow, sweat dripping down my brow as I tilled the fields in the summer heat. I saw myself seated at the long dinner table, my family bowing their heads in prayer, my lips murmuring the words, but even in that moment, I could feel it. The hollowness. The doubt I had buried so deep I had convinced myself it wasn't there. The scenes shifted. I watched myself in worship services, standing among my people, singing the hymns, reciting the prayers. It looked so pious, so righteous. But then, like a cruel trick, the perspective changed, and I saw the truth. I had been going through the motions. My faith had been obedience, routine, duty, but not connection. A chill ran through whatever was left of me. No, I whispered, shaking my head, though I had no body to shake. That's not true. I was faithful. Wasn't I? The memories kept coming, relentless now. I saw the moments I had been too afraid to acknowledge, the times I had silently judged others for their shortcomings, believing myself more righteous because I followed the ordnung so strictly. I saw the hurt in my brother's eyes when I dismissed his questions about faith, thinking doubt was a weakness. I saw the weary look on my mother's face the night I had told her that questioning the rules was dangerous, that she should simply trust, as I did. I had been blind. I had thought I was pleasing God. But I had never truly known Him. The darkness around me thickened, pressing closer, colder. It felt alive, feeding on my guilt, my fear, my realization that everything I had built my life upon was crumbling to dust. I tried to fight it, to hold on to something, anything, but there was nothing. I was nothing. A horrible thought slithered into my mind, one that made my very soul tremble. What if this was it? What if this was where I belonged? No. I screamed into the abyss. God, where are you? Nothing. No warmth. No answer. No hope. Just the terrible, unyielding void. I had never known fear like this. It wasn't the fear of pain or death, this was something deeper, something worse. A fear that stripped me bare, that exposed everything I had ignored, everything I had convinced myself wasn't real. I had spent my life believing that obedience would save me. That if I followed the rules, if I worked hard, prayed the right prayers, lived simply, God would be pleased with me. But here I was, alone, drowning in an emptiness that felt like judgment itself. My voice cracked as I called again, desperation clawing at my throat. Please. God. Where are you? Nothing. The darkness stretched forever. It wasn't just around me, it was in me. A weight pressing down on my soul, as if it had been waiting for me all along. Panic surged. I fought against it, struggling like a man gasping for air beneath the waves, but there was nothing to grasp. No ground beneath me, no sky above. Just an endless, suffocating void. And then the memories came again. Not as flickering images, but as wounds that tore through me. I saw my father standing over me as a child, his face solemn. We do not question, Isaac. We obey. I saw my own lips speaking the same words to my younger brother when he had whispered his doubts late one night. Questioning is dangerous. Trust the Ordnung. That is the only way. But now, in this place, those words felt like chains. I had believed that my devotion had made me righteous, but all it had made me was blind. I had prided myself on never breaking a rule, but what did it matter if my heart had been far from God all along? The weight of regret crushed me. I could almost feel the darkness tightening its grip, pulling me deeper into its suffocating embrace. Was this hell? Was I already damned? I sobbed. I had never sobbed like this before, not in grief, not in pain, not in fear. This was something worse. Hopelessness. For the first time, I understood what it meant to be truly lost. And in that moment, in my utter brokenness, I did the only thing I had left. I fell to my knees, if I even still had knees, and whispered into the abyss, Jesus, if you are real, if you can hear me, please, help me. Don't leave me here. Silence. For a terrible moment, I thought nothing would happen. And then, light. Faint. Barely more than a flicker in the distance. But it was there. A glimmer of warmth cutting through the endless cold. At first, I thought I was imagining it. The light was so small, so distant, like the last dying ember of a fire lost to the cold. It flickered against the oppressive blackness, weak, fragile. But as I watched, it grew. And with it came something I hadn't felt in what seemed like an eternity, warmth. I gasped, though I had no lungs to draw breath. The suffocating void around me recoiled from the light as if it was something foreign, something it could not consume. My chest tightened. Could this be real? The light pulsed, golden and soft, stretching toward me. It wasn't blinding. It wasn't harsh. It was gentle, inviting. Yet as it neared, something inside me twisted with pain. I wanted to run toward it. I wanted to let it pull me from the suffocating emptiness. But I couldn't move. I didn't deserve it. A voice, strong, yet impossibly tender, filled the silence. Isaac. It wasn't a question. It wasn't a command. It was a knowing. A calling. I trembled. He knew me. I had spent my whole life speaking his name, praying to him, obeying the rules in his honor. But here, in this place, hearing his voice for the first time, I realized something that shattered me. I had never truly known him. Tears, if they could exist in a place like this, burned at the edges of my being. The pain wasn't physical. It was something deeper, something raw. A wound that had been festering for years, suddenly laid bare in the presence of that light. The truth hit me like a hammer to my soul. I had lived my entire life trying to earn salvation, following rules, measuring my worth by obedience. I had judged others for their failures while hiding my own doubts beneath a mask of righteousness. And now, standing here, stripped of every illusion, I saw the truth. I was no better than anyone else. I was no more worthy of this light than the ones I had condemned. A sob ripped through me. I'm sorry. My voice cracked, barely above a whisper. I thought I was doing what you wanted. I thought following the ordnung, obeying the rules. I thought it was enough. The light came closer, and with it, the overwhelming weight of love. Not condemnation. Not judgment. But love. I had spent years striving to be good enough, but in this moment, I realized something so simple, so devastatingly beautiful, I had never needed to be enough. Because he was. The light pulsed again, washing over me, filling the cracks in my soul, melting away the crushing regret. And for the first time in my life, I let go. My eyes flew open, and before I could stop myself, the words tore from my lips, Jesus is God. The sound of my own voice shocked me. It was raw, urgent, bursting from deep within me like a force that could no longer be contained. My chest rose and fell in ragged breaths, my heart hammering like a drum against my ribs. The cold air burned my lungs, the scent of gasoline and dirt filling my nostrils. I was alive. Pain jolted through me, sharp and unforgiving, a stark contrast to the warmth I had felt moments ago. Every inch of my body ached, but the agony was overshadowed by something far greater, a revelation that had cracked through the very foundation of my soul. I had seen him. I had stood in the presence of Jesus Christ, not as a distant figure from ancient scripture, not as a theological concept, but as a living, radiant being of unimaginable love and power. And now, I was back. I blinked hard, struggling to make sense of my surroundings. Blurred faces hovered above me, strangers in heavy coats, their breath visible in the crisp winter air. Red and blue lights flashed against the gray sky, bouncing off the shattered remains of my buggy. The twisted metal of a truck loomed nearby, its front end crumpled from the impact. I was sprawled on the frozen ground, my clothes torn, my skin slick with blood. My head throbbed, my body screaming in protest with every small movement. But none of it mattered. I had to tell them. I turned my head, eyes darting toward the nearest paramedic, a middle-aged man with tired eyes and gloved hands pressing against my chest. "Stay with me," he said firmly. "You've been in an accident. Just breathe." But I couldn't stay silent. The truth was burning inside me, demanding to be spoken. I grabbed his wrist with what little strength I had left. "Jesus is real." My voice was hoarse, but desperate. "He is God. I saw him." A choking sob cut through my words. The memory of that light, of his voice, of the love that had washed over me, it was too much. Too overwhelming. The paramedic exchanged a glance with another responder. "You're in shock. Just stay calm, all right? We're going to get you to the hospital." But he didn't understand. None of them did. I wasn't in shock. I wasn't hallucinating. I had been somewhere else. And I had come back changed. Tears blurred my vision as I turned my gaze upward, past the chaos of the accident, past the flashing lights and the worried faces, straight into the vast, open sky. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid. Because I knew the truth now. Jesus is God. And I would never be the same again. I should have been thinking about my broken body, about the bruises and the pain pulsing through every limb as I lay in that hospital bed. I should have been worried about my recovery, about whether I'd walk again without pain, whether I'd ever feel whole. But none of that mattered. Because I had seen Jesus. Because I had died. Because I had come back with the truth. The doctors and nurses moved around me, checking monitors, adjusting IVs, whispering in the hushed voices they always use around people who should be worse off than they are. My parents sat stiffly by my bedside, my father's hands folded tightly in his lap, my mother twisting the hem of her apron between nervous fingers. The scent of antiseptic burned my nose, but I hardly noticed. I had spent my entire life following rules. Now, for the first time, I understood the reason behind them. I turned my head, my voice hoarse but steady. Jesus is real. My mother let out a sharp breath, eyes wide. My father's expression didn't change, but something in his posture stiffened. I saw him, I continued. I was dead. I was in the darkness. And then, my throat tightened. How could I even put into words what had happened? And then I called out to him. And he came for me. My father finally spoke. "Isaac, you were in an accident. You hit your head." His voice was even, but there was something uneasy behind it. "You were unconscious. You were dreaming." I pushed myself up slightly, wincing at the pain. No. This was not a dream. I have never been more awake in my life. My pulse pounded in my ears, but I didn't stop. I spent my life thinking that following the ordnung, obeying every rule, was enough. But I was wrong. My mother's hands flew to her mouth. "Isaac, be careful," she whispered, eyes darting toward my father. I shook my head. "No, I have to say this. I have to. I saw Jesus. And he told me the truth, it's not about the rules. It's about him. It's about knowing him." Silence filled the room. Then my father stood, his face unreadable. "You need rest. I need you to hear me." He turned toward the door. "We will talk later." And just like that, he was gone. I thought my father's rejection would stop me. It didn't. I had to tell people. I had to share what I had seen. At first, I didn't know where to begin. Who would listen? Who would believe me? But then, one evening, as I sat up in my hospital bed, staring at the blank walls, a soft knock came at my door. Caleb. He was a younger man from our community, maybe 22, quiet and reserved, but I had always sensed something restless in him, something questioning. He stepped inside cautiously, his hat in his hands. "I heard what you said," he murmured. "About seeing him." I nodded, my throat tightening. His fingers twisted around the fabric of his hat. I felt it too. The emptiness. The fear that maybe following the rules isn't enough. But I was too afraid to say it. He swallowed hard. Until now. My heart pounded. "It's real, Caleb. Jesus is real. And he doesn't just want our obedience. He wants us." His eyes glistened. "Tell me everything." And so I did. I told him about the darkness, the terror, the moment I thought I was lost forever. I told him how the rules hadn't saved me, how I had followed them perfectly and still ended up in the void. And then, I told him about the light. About the overwhelming love. About the voice that had called my name. By the time I finished, Caleb was shaking. "I've never heard anyone talk about him like this," he whispered. "Not in our way of life." I reached for his hand. "Then let's change that." Word spread. Quietly at first. Then faster. I spoke to anyone who would listen, at first, just whispers in the barns, late-night conversations under the cover of darkness, hushed voices in the corners of town. Some listened with awe. Some with fear. Others, with anger. The elders heard about my testimony. The warnings came. "Isaac, you are walking a dangerous path. You are causing confusion. You will be cast out." But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. And then, the moment came when I knew, this was no longer just about me. One night, Caleb brought 2 others. Then 4. Then 8. We gathered in secret, not to rebel, not to tear down tradition, but to seek Jesus. To pray. To know him, truly know him, beyond the rules, beyond the fears, beyond the burdens we had carried for so long. And in those moments, I felt him. Not in a distant, unreachable way. But here. With us. The darkness had lost its grip on me. And now, I was bringing others into the light. The road ahead was uncertain. I had no plan, no clear direction. All I had was him. But that was enough. As I stepped into the night, the cool air filling my lungs, I felt something new rising inside me. Not fear. Not sorrow. Freedom. And I knew, this was only the beginning. I never imagined I would stand at the edge of eternity. I never thought I would come face to face with the truth of my soul, stripped of all the rules I had followed, all the traditions I had clung to, believing they were enough. But in that darkness, lost, alone, consumed by regret, I realized that obedience alone had never saved me. Then, in my desperation, I cried out to Jesus. And he answered. The moment his light touched me, the weight of my failures, my doubts, and my fear melted away. I had spent my whole life trying to earn his love, but in his presence, I understood the truth. His love had been there all along. It wasn't about being good enough. It was about knowing him. trusting Him, surrendering to Him completely. That experience changed everything. And now, I share my story because I know someone watching this needs to hear it. Maybe you felt the emptiness I once did. Maybe you followed every rule, yet still wonder if it's enough. Or maybe you've doubted if God truly sees you. Let me tell you, He does. And He's waiting for you to turn to Him. If you've ever questioned your faith, if you need Jesus to move in your life, I invite you to leave your prayer in the comments. I will personally pray for each of you, believing that the same Jesus who saved me will touch your life too. If you were in my place, how would you feel after experiencing something like this? Let me know in the comments. And if this story touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Like, subscribe, and share this video so that others can hear the truth and find hope in Jesus.